I'm Roxanne, 28 years old, and today should be the happiest moment of my second chance at love. Standing here in my champagne wedding dress, I see Robert waiting for me with tears in his eyes. But there in the last row of our garden ceremony sits a ghost from my past. Marcus, the man who abandoned me at our wedding reception 5 years ago for his ex-girlfriend. My hands tremble as memories flood back of that devastating night. Before I continue this unbelievable story of the cruelest betrayal imaginable, please let me know where you're watching from today. And if you believe in second chances at love, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one text message destroyed my world and how I found the strength to rebuild it into something even more beautiful. Meeting Marcus felt like destiny had finally smiled upon me. I was 23, fresh out of my accounting degree at Boston University, spending a rainy Thursday afternoon in the campus library, even though I'd graduated 2 months earlier. I loved the quiet sanctuary of those towering bookshelves, the smell of old paper and coffee from the small cafe in the corner. That's where I first saw him struggling with the ancient copy machine that everyone knew required a special touch to work properly. Marcus stood there in his expensive navy suit, clearly frustrated as the machine jammed for the third time. At 26, he was already making a name for himself at Preston and Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. But in that moment, he looked utterly defeated by a simple copy machine. I couldn't help but laugh softly as I watched him actually talking to the machine, promising it all sorts of bribes if it would just cooperate. "You have to press down on the left corner while hitting the start button," I finally said, walking over to help. It's been temperamental since probably 2010. When he turned to look at me, I felt something shift in my chest. Marcus had these incredibly warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. And when he did smile at me, that first time it was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. His dark hair was slightly messed up from running his hands through it in frustration, making him look younger and less intimidating than his designer suit suggested. "You're a lifesaver," he said, his voice deep and genuine. "I've been fighting this thing for 20 minutes. Important deposition documents that needed copying yesterday, of course." I showed him the trick, and the machine hummed to life perfectly. As his documents printed, we started talking. He was charming without being pushy, funny without trying too hard. When he asked if he could buy me coffee to thank me, I surprised myself by saying yes immediately. We sat in that little library cafe for 3 hours, talking about everything from our favorite books to our career dreams. He wanted to make partner before 35 and eventually start his own practice focusing on helping families who couldn't afford quality legal representation. I told him about my plans to work my way up to CFO of a major corporation, how I loved the puzzle of making numbers tell stories. Our first official date was that Saturday at an Italian restaurant in the North End that he'd been wanting to try. Marcus showed up with a single yellow tulip, not a rose, because he'd remembered me mentioning in passing that tulips were my favorites. Throughout dinner, he gave me his complete attention, putting his phone face down and on silent, something so rare these days. He asked thoughtful questions about my family, my dreams, my fears, and actually listened to the answers. My parents adored him from the moment they met him 6 weeks later. My mother, who usually took months to warm up to anyone, was laughing at his stories within minutes. My father, a tough retired Marine, who'd scared away most of my previous boyfriends with his intensity, ended up talking to Marcus for 2 hours about military history, a passion they apparently shared. Even my younger sister Amy, typically skeptical of anyone I dated, pulled me aside that night to whisper, "Julie, this one's different. Don't mess it up." 6 months into our relationship, I met his family at their sprawling home in Cambridge. His mother, Patricia, was a retired federal judge who still commanded attention when she walked into a room. His father, William, ran a successful investment firm. They were intimidating at first, but Marcus held my hand under the table and made sure I felt included in every conversation. His older brother, James, also a lawyer, teased Marcus about finally dating someone smarter than him since I'd graduated summa cum laude while Marcus had merely been magna cum laude. The proposal came exactly 1 year after our first coffee in the library. Marcus recreated that afternoon down to the smallest detail. He'd somehow convinced the library to let him in after hours, had the same table waiting with the same order we'd had that day. When I walked in confused about why he'd asked me to meet him there so late, I found him struggling with the copy machine again. This time, when I went to help him, the paper that came out had "Will you marry me" printed on it. He dropped to one knee right there between the philosophy and political science sections, presenting a classic solitaire diamond that caught the dim library lighting perfectly. Planning our wedding consumed the next year of our lives. Marcus was particular about certain things, wanting the best photographer, the most beautiful venue. We settled on Trinity Church for the ceremony, its stunning architecture providing the perfect backdrop. The reception would be at the Fairmont Hotel with its ballroom that could comfortably accommodate our 200 guests. I spent months selecting the perfect dress, finally choosing an elegant A-line with delicate lace sleeves and a cathedral-length veil that had belonged to my grandmother. There were moments during the planning that should have given me pause looking back now. Marcus would sometimes grow quiet when wedding details were discussed, staring off into space before snapping back with extra enthusiasm, as if compensating for his momentary absence. When his groomsmen would joke about his wild years before me, he'd change the subject quickly. I noticed he had no photos from his college years displayed anywhere, explaining he'd lost them in a move. The bachelor party in Vegas was when I first heard Sophia's name in detail. Marcus had been drunk calling me at 2 a.m, telling me how much he loved me when his friend Kevin grabbed the phone. "You're so much better than Sophia ever was," Kevin slurred. "That girl was crazy, but Marcus was so hung up on her for years. Thank God he found you." When I asked Marcus about it the next day, he brushed it off, saying Sophia was ancient history, someone he'd dated in college and briefly after. 7 years total, he finally admitted when I pressed, but swore it had been over for 3 years before we met. I chose to believe him because I wanted to, because the Marcus I knew was thoughtful and kind, bringing me soup when I was sick, remembering every important date, supporting my career ambitions, even when it meant I worked late hours during tax season. He'd installed a desk in his apartment specifically for me, stocked his fridge with my favorite yogurt, learned to make my grandmother's banana bread recipe when I was homesick. The week before our wedding, everything seemed perfect. We'd had our rehearsal dinner at my parents' house with both families mingling easily. Marcus gave a beautiful speech about how I'd changed his life, how he'd been drifting before he met me, just going through the motions. His voice actually broke when he talked about building our future together, about the children we'd have, the home we'd create. My tough-as-nails father wiped away tears, and my mother hugged Marcus so tight I thought she might never let go. 3 days before the wedding, we signed the lease on our new apartment in Back Bay, a gorgeous 2-bedroom with original hardwood floors and huge windows overlooking the Charles River. We'd spent the afternoon arranging furniture, arguing playfully about where to hang pictures, christening every room in ways that made us both blush and laugh. That night, as we sat on our new couch, eating Chinese takeout straight from the containers, Marcus pulled me close and whispered, "3 more days until you're stuck with me forever, Roxanne Stewart." I kissed him and replied, "Can't wait to be stuck, Marcus Winters." The morning of our wedding dawned absolutely perfect, one of those rare June days in Boston, where the humidity hadn't yet arrived and the sky was a flawless blue. I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, sunlight streaming through the lace curtains my mother had made when I was 10. Amy was already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed with a cup of coffee prepared exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars and just a splash of cream. "Today's the day, Julie," she said, her eyes already getting misty. "My big sister is getting married." My mother bustled in moments later, followed by my 3 bridesmaids, my college roommate Sarah, my cousin Lisa, and Marcus's sister-in-law Claire. The house filled with the sounds of happiness, hairdryers running, champagne glasses clinking, even though it was barely 9 a.m. My mother had insisted on hiring a professional makeup artist and hairstylist, and they transformed my bedroom into a makeshift salon. As I sat in front of the mirror, watching my straight brown hair being curled into elaborate waves and pinned with my grandmother's pearl clips, I felt a flutter of nerves. Not doubt, never doubt about Marcus, but just the natural anxiety of such a momentous day. Sarah must have noticed because she squeezed my shoulder and said, Marcus is probably pacing a hole in the floor at his hotel right now. Kevin texted me that he's already redone his tie 4 times. The dress slipped on like it was made of air and dreams. The lace sleeves hugged my arms perfectly, the bodice cinched my waist just right, and when my mother fastened the buttons up my back with shaking fingers, we both started crying. "You look exactly like I did 35 years ago," she whispered. "Only more beautiful." My father's reaction when he saw me at the bottom of the stairs nearly broke my composure entirely. This man who'd faced combat, who never flinched at anything, had to turn away to compose himself. When he turned back, he simply said, "That boy better know how lucky he is." The ride to Trinity Church in the vintage Rolls-Royce Marcus had surprised me with felt both endless and far too quick. Amy held my hand the entire way, keeping up a stream of cheerful chatter to calm my nerves. Through the window I watched Boston pass by the city where I'd built my life, where I'd found Marcus, where we'd start our family. At the church, everything moved like a perfectly choreographed dance. The wedding coordinator, a woman named Janet, who could probably organize world peace if given the chance, guided everyone into position. I could hear the organ music beginning the rustle of 200 guests standing. My bridesmaids went first one by one, their lavender dresses catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. Then it was my turn. The massive wooden doors opened, and I saw him. Marcus stood at the altar in his black tuxedo, his hands clasped in front of him, and when our eyes met, he smiled that same sunshine smile from the library. The walk down that aisle, my father's arm steady under my hand, felt like floating. I saw faces turn toward me, camera phones discreetly appearing, heard several people gasp, but all I could focus on was Marcus. The ceremony itself was traditional, exactly what we'd both wanted. Reverend Thompson, who'd known Marcus's family for 20 years, spoke beautifully about commitment and partnership. When it came time for the vows, Marcus's voice was strong and clear. "Roxanne, you saved me in ways you'll never fully understand. I promise to love you, to support you, to stand by you through whatever life brings our way. You are my heart, my home, my forever." My own vows, which I'd rewritten probably a dozen times, came out perfectly despite my tears. "Marcus, you showed me what real love looks like. Patient, kind, steadfast. I promise to be your partner in all things, to build our dreams together, to choose you every single day for the rest of our lives." The kiss after, "You may now kiss the bride," was tender and brief, appropriate for the setting, but full of promise. The recessional music soared as we practically ran back down the aisle, both of us laughing with pure joy. In the vestibule before we joined the receiving line, Marcus pulled me close and whispered, "We did it, Mrs. Winters. We actually did it." As the photographer captured what would become the last truly happy moments of my life for a very long time. Pictures on the church steps. Marcus lifting me as my veil billowed in the breeze. The wedding party laughing as Kevin pretended to catch the bouquet. My parents on either side of us beaming with pride. Marcus's parents looking elegant and pleased. Patricia actually crying happy tears. The drive to the Fairmont for the reception was when I first noticed something was off. Marcus kept checking his phone, which he'd promised to keep off for the day. "Just work stuff," he said when I asked, but his jaw was tense in a way I recognized from when he was dealing with difficult cases. I chose to let it go, not wanting anything to dampen our day. The Fairmont ballroom looked like something from a fairy tale. Cream roses and lavender hydrangeas covered every surface, candlelight reflected off crystal glasses, and our wedding cake stood as a 5-tiered masterpiece in the corner. The band was already playing soft jazz as guests found their seats. Marcus and I made our grand entrance to thunderous applause, and for a moment everything felt perfect again. Dinner service began smoothly. Marcus sat beside me at the head table, his hand occasionally finding mine, but I could feel his tension increasing. He barely touched his filet mignon, just pushed it around his plate. When Amy gave her maid of honor speech talking about how she'd never seen me happier, Marcus gripped my hand almost painfully tight. The best man speech from Kevin was when things started unraveling, though I didn't know it at the time. He talked about Marcus's loyalty, his dedication, how when he loved someone, it was with his whole heart. Even when that person didn't deserve it, Kevin said, and I saw several of Marcus's friends exchange looks. But now he's found Roxanne who deserves all of it, and more. It was exactly 8:30 when everything changed. I remember the time because I just glanced at the antique clock on the ballroom wall, thinking we should do the cake cutting soon. Marcus's phone, which he'd placed face down on the table, lit up with a text. He ignored it at first, but then it buzzed again. And again. "Just check it," I said, squeezing his arm. "Get it over with so we can enjoy the rest of our night." He picked up the phone and I watched the color drain from his face as he read. His hands actually started shaking. "I need to step out," he said, his voice strange and tight. "Marcus, what's wrong? Is someone hurt?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. Several people at nearby tables looked over. "I just need some air. I'll be right back." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt oddly like goodbye, and walked quickly toward the exit. I tried to continue smiling, chatting with my aunt, who was complimenting the centerpieces, but my eyes kept going to the door. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Amy noticed my distraction and whispered, "Should I go check on him?" "Give him a few more minutes," I said, though anxiety was building in my chest. 45 minutes. An hour. The band had stopped for a break, and people were starting to notice the groom's absence. Tom, another groomsman, volunteered to go look for him. He returned 20 minutes later, pulling Kevin aside. I watched them have an intense, whispered conversation, Kevin's face growing increasingly alarmed. "Roxanne." Kevin approached me carefully like I was a spooked animal. "Marcus isn't in the hotel. His car is gone from the valet." The words didn't make sense. "What do you mean, his car is gone? We're at our wedding reception." My father and Marcus's brother James joined the search party. They called Marcus's phone repeatedly, getting voicemail every time. Someone checked our honeymoon suite upstairs, thinking maybe he'd felt sick. Empty. The hotel security helped review footage showing Marcus walking quickly through the lobby and out the front door at 8:43. By 11 o'clock, I couldn't maintain the pretense anymore. My mother made the announcement that Marcus had been called away for an emergency, that the party should continue, but nobody believed it. Guests started leaving quietly, offering awkward condolences disguised as congratulations. I stood there in my wedding dress, my grandmother's veil now feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, shaking hands and accepting hugs while my world crumbled. The cleanup of what should have been the happiest night of my life was surreal. Amy and my mother helped me out of my dress in the bridal suite, nobody saying what we were all thinking. My father paced the hallway on the phone with Marcus's parents, who were as bewildered as we were. Claire carefully packed up my dress, folding it with tears streaming down her face. "There has to be an explanation," my mother kept saying. "Marcus wouldn't do this. Something must have happened." But in my heart, watching the staff take down decorations and pack up the uneaten cake, I knew something had broken that could never be fixed. I sat in the suite, still in my wedding hair and makeup, but now wearing jeans and a sweater Amy had brought, staring at my phone and willing it to ring. The last text I'd sent Marcus simply said, "Please just tell me you're okay." It was never answered. I didn't sleep that night. Still wearing my wedding jewelry, I sat in my childhood bedroom while Amy dozed fitfully beside me, my phone clutched in my hand. Every car that passed made my heart race, thinking it might be Marcus coming back with some explanation that would make this all make sense. By dawn, my eyes were so swollen from crying that I could barely open them. Sunday morning arrived with cruel brightness. My mother brought toast and tea that I couldn't stomach. My father had already gone to Marcus's apartment, returning with the news that made everything real. Marcus's closet was half empty, his important documents gone from his desk. He'd clearly come home at some point during our reception and packed. "I'll kill him," my father said quietly, and the deadly calm in his voice was more frightening than if he'd been shouting. "When I find him, I'll kill him." I finally changed out of yesterday's clothes, showered, and tried to think clearly. My first call was to Marcus's office. The weekend security guard couldn't tell me anything but promised to have someone from HR call me Monday morning. I called every hospital in Boston, terrified he'd been in an accident after leaving. Nothing. The police wouldn't file a missing person report because he'd clearly left of his own accord. Patricia Marcus's mother came by Sunday afternoon. Her usual composure was shattered, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Roxanne, I don't understand. This isn't the son I raised. William has called everyone we know. No one has heard from him." Monday brought the first real clue. Marcus's assistant at the firm called to inform me he'd sent an email at 3 a.m. requesting indefinite leave for personal emergency circumstances. When I pressed for more information, she admitted he'd been receiving numerous calls on Friday from a New York number calls that had clearly agitated him. That's when Kevin finally broke. He came to my parents' house Monday evening, unable to meet my eyes. "Jules, I need to tell you something. Sophia contacted him last week." The name hit me like ice water. His ex from college. "She was more than that," Kevin admitted miserably. "They dated for 7 years, were basically married in everything but name. She broke his heart when she left him for some investment banker. Marcus was destroyed, took him 2 years to even go on a date again. Then he met you, and we all thought he was finally over her." "Why did she contact him now?" My voice sounded strange, detached. Kevin pulled out his phone, showing me a screenshot Marcus had sent him Friday morning, clearly distraught. The message from Sophia read, "I made the biggest mistake of my life leaving you. Richard and I are getting divorced. I need you, Marcus. Please. If you don't come to me now, I don't know what I'll do. I can't live without you anymore." "And the text at our wedding?" I asked, though I already knew. I'm guessing something worse. Something that made him panic and run to her. Tuesday, I drove to New York. 4 hours of highway with Amy beside me, trying to talk me out of what I knew was a terrible idea. But I had to see for myself. Kevin had reluctantly given me Sophia's address in Manhattan, an expensive apartment building on the Upper East Side that her soon-to-be ex-husband apparently still paid for. Marcus's BMW was parked outside. Seeing it there, proof that he'd chosen her over me, over our life together, nearly brought me to my knees. Amy held me up as I stared at the building's entrance. Through a second-floor window, I could see shadows moving. 2 people. Close together. "Do you want to go up?" Amy asked. I stood there for almost an hour, gathering courage. Finally, I walked to the door, but my hand froze on the buzzer. What would I say? What was the point? He'd made his choice. I turned around and walked back to my car, leaving my marriage and my dignity on that Manhattan sidewalk. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a process server to my parents' house where I was still hiding. Marcus had hired a lawyer, was offering to give me everything: our new apartment, the car he'd bought me for my birthday, our joint savings. All he wanted was his freedom. He never once called or texted to explain. James. His brother told me Marcus had instructed his family not to contact me, that it would be easier for everyone. Easier. As if anything about this could be easy. My wedding dress still hung in my parents' guest room closet, the tags from the preservation company still attached. The thank you cards for wedding gifts I'd never send sat in boxes. The honeymoon to Greece we'd never take was refunded, minus the cancellation fee. Every part of our life together had to be systematically dismantled, while I could barely get out of bed. The apartment in Back Bay was the hardest to face. Sarah and Amy went with me to pack my things. The furniture we'd argued about, placing the pictures we'd hung together, the bed we'd shared for the past year. I found the post-it notes Marcus would leave me on the bathroom mirror, little love notes I'd saved in a drawer. Beautiful girl, have a beautiful day. Don't forget you're amazing. Can't wait to marry you. I burned them all in my parents' fireplace that night. 3 weeks after the wedding, James came to see me with more information. He'd hired a private investigator, furious at his brother's behavior. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. Sophia had been calling Marcus for months, he'd discovered. She'd been unhappy in her marriage, had been telling Marcus she'd made a mistake. He'd allegedly rebuffed her repeatedly, but she'd escalated. The night of our wedding, she'd sent him a photo of pill bottles, threatening suicide if he didn't come immediately. "He could have told you," James said angrily. Could have called the police for her, could have handled it differently. But he chose to leave you standing there in front of everyone. I'll never forgive him for that. Neither would I realized. Even understanding his panic, even knowing he thought he was saving someone's life, he'd made a choice that destroyed me. He could have taken 2 minutes to explain, could have come back, could have done anything other than disappear into the night with another woman while I stood in my wedding dress wondering what I'd done wrong. The 3 months following my abandoned wedding were the darkest period of my life. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, unable to face the apartment Marcus and I had shared, unable to really face anything at all. I lost 20 pounds I couldn't afford to lose surviving on crackers and tea when my mother forced them on me. My hair started falling out from stress coming away in clumps in the shower until Amy had to cut it short, both of us crying as the scissors worked. I couldn't work. My boss at the accounting firm had given me indefinite leave, but I knew the whispers that would await me when I returned. Poor Roxanne left at the altar. Did you hear her husband ran off with his ex during the reception? Can you imagine? The humiliation felt like a physical weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Sleep became impossible without prescription help, and even then nightmares plagued me. Always the same standing at the altar, but this time Marcus never shows up at all. Or worse, he's there with Sophia, both of them laughing at my stupidity for believing I could ever be enough. My family tried everything. My mother would sit on my bed for hours stroking my hair like when I was a child. My father, not knowing how to handle his broken daughter, threw himself into home improvement projects as if fixing the house could somehow fix me. Amy practically moved in sleeping on an air mattress on my floor, waking me when the nightmares got too bad. But nothing helped. The pain wasn't just emotional. It was physical, a constant ache in my chest where my heart used to be. I'd find myself clutching my stomach doubled over from the intensity of it. Food tasted like ash. Colors seemed muted. The world moved around me while I remained frozen in that moment at 8:30, watching Marcus walk away. It was a Tuesday night in September, 3 months and 4 days after my wedding, when I hit absolute bottom. Amy had finally gone to her own apartment for the night my parents were asleep, and I was alone with my thoughts. The pain felt unbearable, like I was drowning in it, and I just wanted it to stop. I went to the bathroom and found the sleeping pills my doctor had prescribed. The full bottle. I sat on the bathroom floor for an hour, rolling the bottle between my hands. Not actively planning, just considering the relief it might bring. No more pain. No more humiliation. No more wondering what I'd lacked that made Marcus choose her. I opened the bottle, poured the pills into my palm, counted them. More than enough. I don't remember taking them, but I remember Amy's scream. She'd gotten a bad feeling, she told me later, something that made her drive back to check on me at 1 a.m. Found me unconscious on the bathroom floor, pills scattered around me, barely breathing. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and voices. The hospital pumped my stomach, filled me with charcoal, monitored my vitals, while my family stood vigil. I woke up to my mother sobbing, my father pacing, and Amy holding my hand so tight it hurt. "How could you?" my mother kept saying. "How could you leave us?" But that was the wrong question. The right question was, how could I stay? The psychiatric hold lasted 72 hours, then a voluntary additional week when I admitted I wasn't ready to leave. Dr. Martinez, the psychiatrist assigned to me, was a tiny woman with kind eyes who didn't push too hard at first. She let me sit in silence for our first 2 sessions, before gently asking, "What do you think Marcus would feel if you'd succeeded?" "I don't care what he'd feel," I lied. "I think you do," she said simply. "I think you care very much, and that's part of why this hurts so badly." Slowly, painfully, she helped me unpack not just the abandonment, but everything underneath it. My tendency to ignore red flags because I wanted love so badly. My fear that I'd never be anyone's first choice. The childhood roots of needing to be perfect to be loved. We worked through it all while I ate hospital pudding and watched other broken people try to piece themselves together. Group therapy was where I first felt less alone. A woman named Beth had been left by her husband of 15 years for his secretary. A man named David's fiancée had emptied their bank accounts and disappeared. We were all members of the worst club in the world, the discarded and betrayed, but somehow sharing the pain diluted it just enough to bear. My family rallied in ways I never expected. My tough Marine father attended family therapy sessions, crying openly about his guilt for not protecting me better. Amy researched depression and PTSD until she could practically teach the classes. My mother learned to stop trying to fix everything and just be present with my pain. After discharge, I entered intensive outpatient therapy. 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, learning coping mechanisms and rebuilding my sense of self. I started running at first just to the end of the block, and back then gradually farther. The physical exhaustion helped quiet my mind, and there was something healing about my body growing stronger while my heart remained shattered. I moved to a small apartment in Cambridge, needing independence even though my parents worried. It was nothing special, just a one-bedroom with outdated appliances and thin walls, but it was mine. No memories of Marcus in these rooms. I painted the walls a soft green, hung plants. In every window created a space where I could fall apart and rebuild as many times as necessary. The divorce was finalized in December, 6 months after the wedding. Marcus never appeared in court, letting his lawyer handle everything. I got a letter from him through his attorney, a single page that I read once then burned. He apologized, said he knew sorry meant nothing, that he hoped someday I'd find happiness. As if happiness was something you found like spare change in a couch cushion, rather than something destroyed beyond recognition. Work became my lifeline. I returned in January, and my colleagues' awkward sympathy quickly faded as I threw myself into every project available. Tax season arrived like a blessing, 60-hour weeks that left no time for thinking. My supervisor noticed my dedication, recommended me for a senior position. I got it along with a raise that let me afford a better apartment, though I stayed in my little sanctuary. Dating was off the table. The very thought made me nauseous. Well-meaning friends tried to set me up, insisting I needed to get back out there, but I wasn't ready to trust anyone with even coffee, let alone my heart. I focused on friendships instead, strengthening bonds with people who'd stood by me through the worst. 2 years passed this way. Working, running therapy, slowly stitching together a life that didn't include Marcus or romantic love or the future I'd planned. I was functional, even successful professionally, but something essential remained broken. I could laugh again, but it never quite reached my eyes. I could enjoy things, but joy felt forever out of reach. Then on a random Thursday in May, almost 3 years after my destroyed wedding, I heard news through mutual friends Sophia had left Marcus. She'd reconciled with her ex-husband 8 months into her relationship with Marcus, leaving him for the same man she'd left to begin with. The irony should have been satisfying, but I felt nothing. Marcus had destroyed everything for a woman who treated him like a backup plan, and somehow that made it worse, not better. 3 years after my wedding disaster, at 31, I'd built myself into someone I barely recognized. I was chief financial officer of a mid-sized tech startup in Cambridge, the youngest CFO in the company's history. My days were filled with spreadsheets and strategy meetings, my evenings with yoga classes and dinners with friends who'd learned not to mention Marcus's name. I'd even bought my own condo in Brookline, a 2-bedroom with original crown molding and a view of the reservoir where I ran every morning. The financial conference in Chicago that October was just another professional obligation. 3 days of panels and networking at the Palmer House Hilton. The kind of event where everyone wore the same navy suits and discussed market volatility over mediocre coffee. I'd attended dozens of these since throwing myself into my career, usually keeping to myself beyond the necessary socializing. Robert literally ran into me, or rather I ran into him. I was reading quarterly projections on my phone while walking to the keynote speech, not watching where I was going. We collided in the doorway, my coffee exploding everywhere, soaking both his shirt and my blazer. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I gasped, grabbing napkins from a nearby table. "Completely my fault," he said at the same time, pulling tissues from his pocket. I was looking at my phone, too. We stood there awkwardly, dabbing at ourselves, then both started laughing. He had a nice laugh, genuine, and self-deprecating. Robert was 35 with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished rather than old and green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Not conventionally handsome like Marcus had been, but there was something solid and real about him. "Robert Chen," he said, extending a coffee-damp hand, "CEO of Dataflow Solutions. Roxanne Stewart, CFO of Tech Venture Industries," I replied, shaking his hand despite the stickiness. "And destroyer of shirts, apparently." "Well, it needed replacing anyway," he said, looking down at his ruined pale blue Oxford. "My daughter keeps telling me my fashion sense is stuck in 2005. Daughter. Of course he was married. The good ones always were. But then he added, "She's 8 and thinks she's already a fashion expert. Her mom would have agreed with her, though. Would have. Past tense." We ended up sitting together during the keynote, whispering commentary about the speaker's overly optimistic projections. Robert had a sharp financial mind and a dry sense of humor that made the boring presentation bearable. When lunch came, we naturally continued our conversation, finding an empty table in the corner. "So would have agreed?" I asked carefully, not wanting to pry but curious. "Cancer," he said simply. 2 years ago. Melanoma that spread before we caught it. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. There was something in his eyes, a deep sadness that never fully left, even when he smiled, that I recognized from my own mirror. "Thank you. It's been a journey. Emma, my daughter, has been incredible through it all. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for." He paused, then asked, "What about you? Here with anyone, professionally or personally?" I asked, though I knew what he meant. "Either. Both. Solo on both counts," I said. "I'm what you might call aggressively single." He laughed at that. "Aggressively single. I like that. Much better than desperately alone, which is how my sister describes me." We talked through lunch about safer topics. The challenges of being young executives, the Boston versus Chicago tech scenes, the ridiculous amount of money conferences charged for terrible food. He was easy to talk to, no pretense or power plays like so many men in our industry. When the afternoon sessions started, we exchanged business cards with promises to connect on LinkedIn. I didn't expect him to actually reach out, but 3 days after I returned to Boston, he sent a message. "Found a much better coffee place here in Chicago. No danger of shirt destruction. If you're ever in town again, coffee's on me. The drink, not the spillage." It made me smile, the first genuine smile about a man in 3 years. We started exchanging emails about industry stuff, at first sharing articles and market analysis. Gradually, they became more personal. He told me about Emma's school plays and soccer games. I told him about my morning runs and my mother's attempts to set me up with her dentist's son. 2 months later, I had a legitimate business reason to be in Chicago, meeting with potential investors. Robert and I met for that coffee, which turned into lunch, which turned into a 4-hour conversation in Millennium Park. He told me about his wife, Anna, how they'd met in business school, how her death had shattered him, but also taught him that time was too precious to waste on things that didn't matter. "I wasn't sure I'd ever want to date again," he admitted as we walked by the lake. "But Emma asked me recently if it was okay with her if I found someone to have dinner with sometimes, so she didn't have to worry about me eating cereal alone every night." "Smart kid," I said. "Too smart." She also said, and I quote, "Dad, you're getting weird from too much alone time. You need adult friends." I laughed, really laughed. Harsh, but probably fair. "Completely fair," he agreed. "So Roxanne Stewart, would you be willing to be my adult friend who prevents weird—" It wasn't a romantic proposition, not yet. Just friendship between two damaged people who understood that sometimes the worst things had already happened. So what was left to fear? We met monthly, alternating between Boston and Chicago. Always public, always professional-ish, but slowly becoming something more. 6 months into our friendship, Robert was in Boston for a conference. Emma was with Anna's parents for the week. We had dinner at a small Italian place in the North End, not far from where Marcus had taken me on our first date, though I didn't mention that. Over pasta and wine, Robert grew quiet. I need to tell you something, he said. My sister did some Googling about you. My stomach dropped. Of course. The internet never forgot anything, and my disaster of a wedding had made it into several society pages thanks to the prominent families involved. Ah, I said, putting down my fork. I couldn't handle this pain. But you didn't succeed, he said softly. You're here. You rebuilt. You're a CFO at 31. You run every morning. You make me laugh with your emails. You're here. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone that way again, I admitted. I'm not asking you to, Robert said. I'm just asking if maybe you'd like to have dinner again sometime. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who understand that life can be brutal, but maybe doesn't have to be brutal alone. A year. That's how long Robert waited while I figured out if I could risk my heart again. A year of dinners and concerts and walks around the city. He met my parents, charming my mother with his knowledge of gardening and earning my father's respect by not pushing me. I met Emma, who immediately decided I was acceptable because I knew all the words to the Frozen 2 soundtrack. The first time Robert told me he loved me, we were building a snowman with Emma in his backyard. She'd gone inside for hot chocolate supplies, and he just said it quietly like a fact rather than a declaration. I love you, Roxanne. I don't need you to say it back. I just needed you to know. It took me 3 more months to say it back on an ordinary Tuesday while we were doing dishes after dinner. I love you too, I said, and he dropped the plate he was holding. It shattered on the floor, and we both stood there laughing and crying while Emma yelled from the living room asking if everyone was okay. The proposal came 2 years after that spilled coffee, nothing elaborate, just Robert and me on my couch in Brookline. Emma asleep in the guest room. He didn't get on one knee, didn't make a big speech. I want to marry you, he said simply. I want Emma to officially have you as her stepmom. I want to wake up next to you every day and know that we chose each other after everything that tried to break us. Will you marry me? The ring was simple, a sapphire instead of a diamond, because he'd noticed I always wore blue. Not trying to compete with my past, just offering a different future. Small wedding, I said immediately. Really small. Backyard small, he suggested. Perfect, I said, and meant it. The morning of my second wedding, 5 years after the first disaster, I woke up calm. No army of bridesmaids, no elaborate preparations, just Amy helping me into a simple champagne-colored dress in my childhood bedroom. My mother had insisted I get ready there for tradition, though everything else about this day would break from convention. You look beautiful, Amy said, zipping up the knee-length dress I'd bought off the rack at Nordstrom 2 weeks ago. And happy. Actually, happy. I studied my reflection, seeing the differences 5 years had made. Fine lines around my eyes from genuine smiles Robert had coaxed back onto my face. Hair grown long again, pulled into a simple low bun with baby's breath tucked in. No veil, no train, no pretense. Just me, Roxanne, 33 years old, and somehow brave enough to try again. Robert had spent the night at a hotel with Emma, who'd insisted on tradition even for a small wedding. She'd called me 3 times already this morning, too excited to wait. Did you put on the bracelet I got you? She asked in her 3rd call. It's your something new. The bracelet was a delicate silver chain with a small heart charm Mom engraved on it. Not stepmother, not Roxanne, but Mom. I'd cried when she gave it to me last night, this child who'd lost so much choosing to give me the title that meant everything. The ceremony would be in Robert's parents' backyard in Newton, transformed with simple string lights and white flowers. 100 guests instead of 200, only the people who truly mattered to us. Robert's family, mine, close friends who'd seen us through our respective Hell's colleagues, who'd become real friends. Small, safe, real. My father drove me to the venue, just the 2 of us in his truck. You sure about this one? He asked, though his tone was gentle, not doubting. Yes, I said simply. Robert isn't Marcus. He's shown me that every day for 2 years. Good, my father said, because I really don't want to have to kill anyone. I'm too old for prison. The backyard looked magical in the late afternoon light. White chairs arranged in a semicircle, an arch of roses where Robert's cousin, ordained online for the occasion, would marry us. No long aisle to walk, no massive church. No room for grand gestures or dramatic exits. Just a garden and the people we loved. Emma ran up to me the moment I arrived, twirling in her light pink dress. "You look like a princess, a real one, not a Disney one." Robert stood by the arch in a simple gray suit, no tuxedo, no groomsmen lined up beside him. When he saw me, his whole face lit up, not with drama or performance, but with quiet joy. This was a man who'd held my hair when food poisoning hit, during a business trip, who'd seen me ugly cry over Excel spreadsheet errors, who knew exactly how damaged I was and chose me anyway. I was halfway to him, my father's arm steady under my hand, when I saw the ghost. Marcus sat in the very last row, trying to be invisible but failing because I'd know that profile anywhere. 5 years had aged him badly. His hair was thinner, his face gaunt, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. He wore an ill-fitting black suit and sat completely alone, hands clenched in his lap. My step faltered. My father felt it followed my gaze, and his arm turned to iron under my hand. "Say the word, and I'll remove him," he whispered. But Robert had seen too. My future husband looked at me, then at Marcus, then back at me. He raised his eyebrows, slightly a question. I could see Kevin near the middle, looking horrified at Marcus's presence. He clearly hadn't known Marcus would come. I had a choice. Make a scene and let Marcus ruin another wedding, or continue walking toward the man who'd never let me down. The decision was easier than breathing. I straightened my spine, looked directly at Robert, and smiled. Real, genuine, radiant. My father walked me those final steps, kissed my cheek, and placed my hand in Robert's. "You okay?" Robert whispered. "Perfect," I said, and meant it. The ceremony was deliberately brief. Robert's cousin talked about second chances and choosing love after loss. Emma stood between us, holding the rings on a pillow she'd decorated herself with approximately 1,000 sequins. When it came time for vows, we'd written our own but kept them short. Robert went first. "Roxanne, you taught me that hearts can break and still beat. That love isn't about perfect beginnings, but about choosing to stay when things get hard. I promise to choose you every morning, to dance with you in the kitchen while dinner burns, and to never ever leave you wondering where you stand with me. You and Emma are my whole world, and I promise to protect that world with everything I have." My voice stayed steady through my own vows, though tears ran down my cheeks. "Robert, you showed me that trust could be rebuilt, that love could be quiet and steady and sure. You waited while I healed, held space for my fears, and proved every day that some men stay. I promise to love you and Emma with my whole reconstructed heart, to build our family on a foundation of truth and choice and presence. I choose you today and always." Emma piped up, then unscripted. "I choose you too, Roxanne. As my mom." The guests laughed through tears. Robert's cousin pronounced us married, and the kiss was sweet and brief and perfect. No running back down an aisle, no grand exit. We simply turned to face our guests as a married couple, while Emma hugged us both around the waist. That's when I looked again at Marcus. He was crying, not prettily, but in that ugly way men cry when they finally understand what they've lost. His shoulders shook as he watched Emma bounce between Robert and me, as he saw Robert's hand protectively on my back, as he witnessed the quiet, real joy on my face. The reception was in the same backyard, just adding tables and a small dance floor. No assigned seating except for the main table where Robert, Emma, and I sat with our parents. Marcus had moved to stand by a tree at the property's edge, far from the celebration but unable to leave. Kevin approached him once, clearly arguing, but Marcus shook his head and stayed. During dinner, Emma chattered about her plans for our family honeymoon to Disney World next month. "It's better than a regular honeymoon," she informed the table. "Because I get to come." Robert caught my eye over her head, smiling at this child who'd helped heal both of us. This was what I'd wanted the first time, but hadn't known how to articulate, not a performance of love, but the daily reality of it. Not grand gestures, but small consistencies. Amy gave a short toast, saying simply, My sister learned that falling isn't failing unless you stay down. Robert, thank you for being worth getting back up for. Robert's brother talked about seeing his brother come back to life after Anna's death, how I'd returned light to their family. No mentions of the past, no veiled references to what came before. This was a new story, not a sequel to an old one. As the sun set and the string lights came on, creating a golden glow over the yard, couples started dancing to the playlist Emma had mostly created. Robert and I swayed to At Last by Etta James, his arms around me, my head on his shoulder. He's still here, Robert murmured. Want me to have him removed? No, I said, surprising myself. Let him watch what he threw away. Let him see what actual love looks like. We danced with Emma next, the three of us in a circle, her standing on Robert's feet while holding my hands. This was my family now, built not from naive first love, but from conscious choice after devastating loss. An hour into the reception, Kevin approached our table. Jules, I'm sorry. I had no idea he'd come. He found out through social media, I think. He's been really bad since Sophia left him for the third time. Lost his job, his apartment. He's staying with his parents. Not my problem anymore, I said, and found I meant it. He wants to apologize, Kevin said hesitantly. Should I tell him to leave? I looked at Robert, who squeezed my hand. Your call, he said. Whatever you need. Tell him to stay where he is. I decided. He can watch, but he doesn't get to speak to me. Not today. Not ever. Kevin nodded and returned to Marcus, who seemed to shrink even more at whatever Kevin said. But he stayed, bearing witness to every dance, every laugh, every moment of the life he'd thrown away for someone who'd never really wanted him. When it came time to cut the small cake Emma had insisted on decorating with approximately half a craft store's worth of edible pearls, Marcus was still there. When Robert's father made a surprise toast about how I'd given him back his son and granddaughter, Marcus watched. When my father hugged Robert and called him son, something he'd never done with Marcus, despite 3 years of dating, Marcus saw it all. The party wound down naturally, around 10 guests hugging us goodbye and heading home. Marcus finally left when the catering staff started clearing tables, slipping away into the darkness without a word. Kevin told me later that Marcus had whispered one thing before leaving. She found what I couldn't give her, someone who stays. Robert and I flew to Disney World with Emma the next morning, leaving the ghost of Marcus behind in that garden. The week was perfect chaos, Emma dragging us onto every ride, Robert wearing mouse ears without complaint, all three of us falling asleep watching movies in our hotel room each night. It was the exact opposite of the Italian honeymoon Marcus and I had planned, and infinitely better. A year later, Robert and I were sitting in our living room in the house we'd bought together in Arlington when an envelope arrived with familiar handwriting. Marcus's wedding invitation. He was marrying someone named Jennifer, a teacher he'd met in therapy apparently. Kevin had filled me in without my asking. You want to go? Robert asked, reading over my shoulder. God, no, I said, tossing the invitation into the recycling. But I'll send a card. Something appropriate. I sent a simple congratulations card with no personal message. Closure doesn't require confrontation. Sometimes it's just the quiet absence of pain where devastation used to live. 2 years after our backyard wedding, Robert and I had our son Thomas. Emma was 9 and immediately declared herself the best big sister in Massachusetts, possibly the world. The delivery was complicated, requiring an emergency cesarean, and Robert never left my side. When the nurse tried to send him out during prep, he simply said, I promise never to leave. That includes operating rooms. Watching him hold our son for the first time, tears streaming down his face. While Emma peered over his shoulder, I understood that this was what I'd been meant to find. Not the easy first love that had never been tested, but the deliberate second love that knew the cost of loss and chose to risk it anyway. Marcus and Jennifer's marriage lasted 18 months. Kevin told me at a mutual friend's birthday party, not gossiping, but seeming to think I should know. Marcus had apparently been unable to stop comparing everything to what we'd had, driving Jennifer away with his obsession over the past. He was in therapy now, real therapy, trying to understand why he destroyed everything he touched. Does it make you feel vindicated? Amy asked when I told her. No, I said honestly. Just sad. Sad that he learned too late that you can't run backward and expect to move forward. 3 years after our wedding, I ran into Marcus at Whole Foods in Cambridge. I was picking up Emma from dance class and had stopped for groceries. He was in the cereal aisle looking lost. He'd aged another decade in 3 years, hair completely gray now at 39 deep lines carved around his mouth. He saw me before I could redirect his eyes widening, then filling with such profound sadness I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Roxanne, he said my name seemingly pulled from him against his will. Marcus, I acknowledged, continuing to push my cart past him. Wait, please, he said. Just 30 seconds. I stopped, not turning around. 20. I'm sorry, he said in a rush. Not just for leaving, but for not being brave enough to stay. For choosing the past over our future. For being a coward. You look happy. Really happy. That makes me glad and devastated simultaneously. Time's up, I said and kept walking. I loved you, he called after me. I just loved her first and couldn't let go. I turned then, looking at this broken man who'd broken me first. No, Marcus. You loved the idea of her. You loved the drama and pain and impossibility. You didn't know how to love the real thing when it was standing right in front of you in a wedding dress. But I learned something from you, so thank you for that. What? He asked, desperate for something, anything. I learned that the right person doesn't leave. Not for their ex, not for their past, not for anything. Robert showed me that. So thank you for teaching me what love isn't, so I could recognize what it is. I left him standing there among the organic cereals and gluten-free pasta, drove to pick up Emma, and never looked back. That night after the kids were asleep, I told Robert about the encounter. You okay? He asked, pulling me closer on the couch. More than okay, I said. I'm free. The truth about betrayal is that it feels like death because it is one. The person you were, the future, you planned, the trust you had, all die in that moment of abandonment. I died at 8:30 on June 15th when Marcus walked out of our wedding reception. But here's what I learned sometimes. Death isn't the end. Sometimes it's compost for something better to grow. Marcus thought he was choosing love when he ran to Sophia, but he was choosing familiar dysfunction over unfamiliar stability. He mistook intensity for depth, drama for passion. She'd trained him through 7 years to chase her, and he didn't know how to love someone who simply stayed. I thought I'd never recover from that betrayal. For months I wished I hadn't survived my overdose. The pain felt infinite, insurmountable, like I'd carry it forever, like shrapnel too deep to remove. And in a way, I do still carry it. There are scars that ache when it rains, trust issues that occasionally surface moments when Robert travels for work, and I fight the irrational fear he won't come back. But scar tissue is stronger than regular skin. My rebuilt heart loves Robert more deeply because it knows what loss feels like. I parent Emma and Thomas with fierce presence because I know how it feels to be abandoned. I chose my second marriage with eyes wide open, knowing exactly how much it would hurt if it failed, and choosing it anyway. Robert never asks me to forget my past or pretend it didn't shape me. On our anniversary each year, we don't celebrate on the actual date, but the day after, because he knows the date itself carries shadows. When I wake up from occasional nightmares about abandonment, he doesn't get frustrated or take it personally. He just holds me and lists all the ways he's boring and predictable and never going anywhere. I'm too lazy to leave, he'll joke. Do you know how much work it would be to pack? And Emma would definitely choose you in the divorce. I'd get stuck with visiting rights and have to learn to cook for myself. Much easier to just stay married. Emma, now 13, recently asked me if I ever think about what would have happened if my first wedding had worked out. Then I wouldn't have you, I told her honestly. And I can't imagine any universe where that would be better than this one. She hugged me, then this child who'd lost her biological mother, but chosen me as her real one, and said, I'm glad he was stupid enough to leave. Otherwise, Dad and I wouldn't have found you. That's the final truth about my story. Marcus leaving wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. It was grace. Painful, brutal grace that cleared the path for the life I was actually meant to live. He was never my person. He was just the lesson I needed to recognize my person when he literally ran into me covered in coffee. I recently received a message through LinkedIn from Sophia. After all these years, she wanted to apologize for everything that happened. I didn't respond. She and Marcus deserved each other in their dysfunction, their inability to be satisfied with steady love, their addiction to drama and pain. They were each other's karma running in circles of leaving and returning, never understanding that love shouldn't require that much suffering. My love with Robert isn't a fairy tale. It's better. It's real. It's morning breath and work stress, and arguing about loading the dishwasher correctly. It's Emma's teenage moods, and Thomas's endless questions and family dinners where someone always spills something. It's Robert gaining 15 pounds, and me going gray, and both of us choosing each other anyway every single ordinary day. The wedding where Marcus watched me marry another man was the ending he deserved to witness, the happiness he threw away to see that I didn't need him to be whole to understand that some choices can't be undone. But it was also the beginning I deserved, surrounded by people who stayed, marrying a man who knew all my broken pieces and loved them. Starting a family built on presence rather than promises. Sometimes when I'm watching Robert help Thomas with homework, while Emma practices violin in the next room, our dog Carl snoring on my feet, I think about that girl in the wedding dress, abandoned and humiliated, convinced her life was over. I wish I could tell her that the humiliation would fade, the pain would transform into wisdom, and one day she'd be grateful Marcus left. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, genuinely grateful. Because here's what that broken girl didn't know: she was already enough. Marcus leaving didn't diminish her worth. It revealed his limitations. She would survive things she didn't think she could survive. She would build a career, buy a home, learn to trust again. She would become a mother to a grieving child and heal them both. She would marry a man who'd seen death take his first love and still chose to love again, who understood that marriage isn't just the wedding but all the ordinary days that follow. That girl would learn that the best revenge isn't living well to spite someone who hurt you. It's living well because you deserve it, and eventually forgetting to check if they're watching. Marcus taught me that someone can say all the right words and still leave. Robert taught me that someone can struggle with words but stay forever. Marcus taught me that passion can feel like love, but burn out just as fast. Robert taught me that real love is steady heat, sustainable, warming you through every season. I don't hate Marcus anymore. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend on my actual life. I hope he finds peace, finds therapy that works, finds a way to stop running. But I also hope I never see him again, never have to make small talk or pretend we're friends, or act like what he did was forgivable. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some people are meant to stay in the past, serving only as reminders of how far we've come. My story isn't unique. Thousands of people have been left at altars, abandoned for exes, betrayed by those they trusted most. But survival isn't about being unique. It's about being stubborn. Too stubborn to let someone else's cowardice define your worth. Too stubborn to let pain have the last word. Too stubborn to stop believing that somewhere out there is someone who knows how to stay. To anyone watching this who's been abandoned, betrayed, left wondering what you did wrong, it wasn't you. It was never you. People who leave the way Marcus left don't leave because of something you lack. They leave because of something they lack. The capacity for real intimacy. The courage to choose the future over the past. The wisdom to recognize home when they're standing in it. Your Marcus might have been different. Maybe they left for someone younger, richer, more exciting. Maybe they just left no explanation, no other person, just gone. Maybe they stayed physically but left emotionally present, but absent, making you beg for crumbs of affection. However they left, the wound is the same. The person you trusted most proved unworthy of that trust. But here's what I know now. What 5 years and a second chance taught me: their leaving isn't your ending. It's a painful chapter in a longer story. You get to write what comes next. Maybe you'll find your Robert someone who sees your scars as proof of strength. Maybe you'll find that you're enough alone that romantic love isn't the only kind that matters. Maybe you'll build a life so full that when your Marcus shows up to watch your happiness, you won't even notice they're there. The scar from that abandonment will always be there. Sometimes it will ache, catching you off guard with a song or a scent, or a random Tuesday when you remember what it felt like to believe you'd found forever. But scars are proof of healing evidence that what tried to kill you didn't succeed. They're ugly and beautiful, painful and powerful, marking where you broke and where you rebuilt stronger. If you're still in the fresh wound stage when it feels like you can't breathe through the pain, when you're Googling their ex at 3 in the morning, when you're convinced you'll never be okay again, you will be. Not tomorrow, probably not next month, maybe not even next year. But someday you'll realize you went a whole day without thinking about them, then a week. Then you'll hear their name and feel nothing but mild curiosity, like hearing about a stranger's life. That indifference isn't cold or bitter. It's freedom. Freedom from wondering why you weren't enough. Freedom from checking their social media. Freedom from the story they wrote, where you were disposable. You get to write your own story now, one where you're the hero who saves herself, where the love interest is someone who knows how to stay, where the ending isn't about revenge or vindication, but about peace. My peace looks like Sunday mornings with Robert making pancakes, while Emma complains about having to wake up before noon, and Thomas builds elaborate Lego castles on the kitchen floor. It looks like random Wednesday texts from Robert saying he picked up my favorite Thai food just because. It looks like Amy and I laughing about how we thought Marcus was the catch of the century, when really he was just well-dressed emotional dysfunction. It looks like standing in my backyard during Emma's birthday party, watching Robert teach Thomas to throw a baseball badly. Both of them laughing at their mutual lack of athletic ability and feeling so grateful Marcus left that it takes my breath away. Because this life, this messy, ordinary, beautiful life, is what I would have missed if he'd stayed. So thank you, Marcus, for that text. At 8:30 that changed everything. Thank you for choosing your past over our future. Thank you for the devastating gift of your absence, which made space for Robert's presence. Thank you for teaching me what I didn't want, so I could recognize what I did. But mostly thank you for leaving before we had children, before more years were wasted, before I got too comfortable in a relationship that would have always made me second choice. Your cowardice gave me the chance to be someone's first choice, only choice, forever choice. The wedding you crashed 5 years later wasn't about you, though. I know you thought it was when you showed up uninvited and broken. It was about Robert and Emma and me choosing to be a family despite the ghosts we all carried. Your presence there was just punctuation on a sentence already written. You left. I survived. I thrived. The end. Except it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything that actually mattered. How has betrayal changed your life for the better? What did you learn about yourself when someone you trusted chose to leave? I'd love to hear your stories of survival and second chances in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real stories about real pain and real healing. Share this with someone who needs to hear that abandonment isn't the end of their story. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to building something better. Remember, the person who left you didn't take your worth with them. They revealed their own limitations. You're already enough with or without them. Stay strong and know that your second chance at happiness might be just one spilled coffee away from finding you.